Welcome! So today we're talking about books. Again. Because apparently I just can't seem to stop talking about them. But this month I read some, in my opinion, really beautiful books that gave like these spring type of vibes, and I just needed to share. So that's what we're doing right now. It's actually raining right now, so the weather right now really isn't giving spring vibes to me, but I want to talk about some books that just, to me, because I feel like some people might disagree, but to me, those books just radiate like spring vibes. So most of these books are just like no plot, just vibes, or like maybe a little plot, but mostly vibes. So these are just books that I read in the past, and they just have these like beautiful, whimsical, magical, like ghibli, fairy tale-ish vibes that I personally just love to read, especially when spring is coming up and everything is blooming and blossoming outside and the sun is coming out. Not right now, sadly, because we had like sun for one weekend and it's been raining ever since, but that's fine. That's why we're reading those books, to get the feeling, even though it might not even be there, you know? So some of these books I read in the last few days while I was sitting in the sun outside in my garden, and I was just enjoying it and soaking it all in. And like I said, now it's raining again. So now I have these type of books to distract me from rain and thunder. I guess that's also great. Oh, and I also made myself a matcha, and I feel like the ice is melting in there, so maybe I should drink it a little bit faster and stop talking so much. That was actually magical. I don't think I've made a matcha this good ever before, so I'm happy. Anyways, okay, so the first book I want to talk about, oh my goodness, I just read it like 2 or 3 days ago actually. And it's called The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. And I had no idea what this book was about actually. I just saw the cover and also the name, and I immediately decided I'm gonna love this book. And then I read it and I did love it. So I guess you can't judge a book by its cover. So in this book we follow our main girl, Mina, and she just lives in a village on an island, I think, and the island has been plagued by really, really bad, like, storms, thunder, and the sea is just all crazy. And it has been like that for a long time, like many, many years. So one day the village decided that this just has to mean that the sea god is angry, and he can only be calmed down by giving him a bride. So they just every year throw a girl into the sea as his bride, and then the storms are gone for like a few months or like a year, and then they have to do it all over again. So that's fun. And we immediately start the book with Mina being on a boat. She's not the sea god's bride though, she's just a girl, and the girl who is the sea god's bride, sadly her brother is in love with that girl, and the brother is just really distressed and he doesn't want his girlfriend to be thrown into the sea, obviously. So Mina just decides, well, what if I just go? So she just jumps in, and that's really not a spoiler. It all happens in like the first 2 pages of the book. It's so fast. So then we're in the sea, but then we're not in the sea anymore, because she actually ends up in a spirit world. And if you haven't watched Spirited Away, in my opinion, it's really similar. Like, I feel like the vibe is so similar of the story and the book. So if you enjoyed that, because it's personally my favorite Ghibli movie, I think you might enjoy this book as well. So she ends up in the spirit world, and the spirits are not too happy that she's there, because she's not the person that was supposed to come. The spirit world might not be as chill and fun either. They're also having their struggles. They're always saying like, well, we only get what comes from the human world, so if our world sucks, where does it come from? And so she decides that she just has to save her village, and to do that she also has to save the spirit world. So like, chill, fun day, I guess. So in the story we just follow her on her quest to save everyone, and I guess kind of save the sea god as well, because we don't know what's going on, but for some reason he is angry and is making storms. So don't know what's going on there. Like I said, I just read this book and it was so lovely. I really enjoyed it, and I just think it gave me so much of like Ghibli vibe, and I love Ghibli movies so much, so it was just very nice and like a very fun way to start off the spring. And I think that's all I have to say about it. I really loved it. It was just a very good book. The story was really interesting, and I swear for me the story, like the pages flew by so fast, because I think I started the book on my way to uni, because it takes me like an hour to get there, and then I finished it on my way back. So it took me like 2 hours maybe to read the book, but I was reading when I got out of the bus and had to walk home. I was reading while I was walking home because I just couldn't stop. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and maybe you will too. Okay, the next series I want to talk about is Anne of Green Gables, and this was my absolute favorite book when I was a child. Maybe I even have it. Wait a second. Okay, so I actually just realized I have the German version, and I also have an English version of it. So I don't know, but especially this book, this was everything to me when I was a child. I read it so many times, and it's also like it's over 600 pages. So you gotta remember, I was like 10 and I was reading this book all the time. So in this book we follow a girl called Anne, and she has red hair. It's very important for the story. And she's an orphan. Her parents died when she was a child, and she has been in and out of orphanages like all of her life. And we don't go into it too much in the books, but I'm pretty sure what she experienced some places wasn't that great. But even through all the stuff that she had to endure, she didn't lose her spirit, and it's just so beautiful. So that's just the backstory. The main plot is that she gets adopted by 2 siblings, Matthew and Marilla, and they were actually looking for a boy, but then they end up really liking her, so they keep her anyways. And basically the whole story is just Anne being herself, because she has a very beautiful personality. She really loves to imagine things and always talks about fairies and all that kind of stuff. And for me as a child, that was just so relatable, because I also always looked for the magic in everything. And I actually think we should do that more, even as adults. So I think it's just a really beautiful story, and she sometimes gets into a lot of trouble, but on accident. She's really, like, she's such a good person to her core. But she's just a little bit like clumsy, and so sometimes some weird things happen to her, and it's just so beautiful. And it's just everything that happens to her is just somehow so fun, but so sweet and beautiful, and you just can't help but love her, in my opinion. And there's also a TV series which I think is very popular, but where I live, I feel like not that many people know about it. So like me and my best friend talk about it all the time, but I don't think I've seen anyone else talk about this show here. Like, I think the book is very popular in America, but I have never seen anyone talk about it here. Even my best friend, who also loved the series, didn't know there was a book series for it. And so I told her about it, and then she just went through all of them. And now we can talk about everything, and she also loved them so much. So yeah, and English and German, I can only recommend. I love these books so much. We're just following a girl going on so many adventures, and it's just really beautiful to read. And for me as a child, Anne was just always kind of like weird. That's what she says about herself, and that's what everyone else says about her. But I don't think she's weird. I think she's just like a child with a great imagination and fantasy, and just loves life. I think that's the main thing. She really loves life, and it's just so nice to see someone with such a positive attitude, even if they have gone through so much. And yeah, I just always loved this book, and I need more people to talk about it. So now I did that. I also read The Tea Dragon Society, and It's a little graphic novel and it's so short. I think there's like 3 and I also read all 3 of them. And the first one is only 50 pages. And this is just such a cute little short story to read when you have time and want to sit in the sun in the garden. I don't know. Even if you don't want to sit in the sun, just read it. You don't even have to read much because there's pictures. Mostly because it's a graphic novel. But this was just the cutest like children's story that I read, and like I think it's supposed to be for children, but anyone can read this. So like I said, it's only 50 pages. So in the story we follow a young girl that wants to become a blacksmith, but then she discovers a tea dragon, in case you didn't know, because it's part of the universe of the book. Tea dragons are like cute, more like tiny little dragons that have leaves on them, like all over them. Sometimes it's just on their horns, sometimes it's like on their back, and they just have leaves, like they grow leaves on themselves and you make tea with it, and it's just so cute. And so in the first book the main girl just learns how to make tea with the tea dragons, and she also meets a girl there, and it's just so cute. I cannot recommend it enough. So it was just really, really inclusive without being forceful, really beautiful, and the vibes were magical. And the illustrations were so pretty. Like I said, it's a graphic novel, and I think the author drew the illustrations as well themselves, and it's just so beautiful and lovely. And I also read a really stressful and disturbing book before this, and that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it. I also like gruesome stuff sometimes, I guess, but it was just really depressing for me and kind of disgusting. So just afterwards being thrown into this beautiful and sweet and whimsical world of tea dragons, it was like the perfect, most opposite story I could have gone with afterwards. Like I could have picked up anything, but I decided to go with this, and it was just so perfect because it really put me out of the depression from the other book. So I really liked this one, and I would recommend anyone to read it because, like I said, it's so short, like you can just fit it in anytime. The other 2 are a little bit longer, like 100 pages, but also like it's 100 pages, but there's only 5 sentences on 1 page sometimes because it's mostly pictures, which are gorgeous, so you should also look at them, but it just, I don't think it takes that long to read those books. So the next book I want to talk about is called The Starless Sea. Just off the bat, if you don't like books that have like a very confusing random plot and it's really mostly about the vibes, then this one might not be for you, because it's just, there's a lot of confusing things happening and you're just wondering why and how it's connected and all of that. And I feel like a lot of people don't like that kind of writing where you're just really confused while reading it. I personally love it, so this book was amazing for me. I do think it dragged a little bit at the beginning, but later on it's just great. And oh my god, how am I gonna explain this? Wait, okay. So Goodreads also says this, so I guess I can also say it, and it shouldn't be considered a spoiler. This book is very hard to talk about without spoiling anything, because how do I explain? So in the main storyline we follow a guy called Zach. I know he doesn't want to be called Zach, I'm so sorry, but I can't pronounce. Is it Zachariah? I can't remember names, so we're calling him Zach. I'm pretty sure he says sometime in the book that he doesn't want to be called Zach, but I can't. I'm sorry, but I just can't remember names. And Zach is short, and I can remember that. So the main character is called Zach, and he's a student. He studies something with video games. I don't remember what exactly, but it also isn't that important to the story. And one day he just goes to the library to read some books and finds a book that has no like title, no cover really on it, and it looks pretty old, and he starts to read it and it's just random stories. But then he reads one story and realizes, whoa, that actually is a story about something that happened to me when I was a child. Like, why is there a book about me in a library? Like, who, what, you know? So he's just very confused, because why is there a random book in a library that contains a storyline about him. And so he tries to uncover what this is about. And I don't think I want to say even more because there's just a lot happening in this book. But yeah, in the book itself, just so you're not confused, we also get told some of the stories that he reads about in the book. So some chapters are just the stories of his book being told. And they might be connected more to his life than he thinks. But I think that's all I'm going to say about it. I really like this book. I also read Night Circus, which is another book from the same author. I also kind of wanted to include it in this list, but it just didn't feel spring vibey at all. Because they literally talk about everything is black and white, and like, I don't know, maybe this one isn't that spring vibey either, because they're also like underground a lot, and yeah. But I don't care. To me, the writing was just very beautiful and whimsical. And some people said that the writing is too childish for them, or like it's explaining something to a child. But I personally, I don't know. I don't think just because something is written like beautifully with nice wording that it's for children. Because I feel like a lot of people think something is for adults when it's hard to understand. You know what I mean? Like when there's like really complicated words, and that's just not what's happening in this book. But I don't think that's a bad thing. So I personally really liked it. I really enjoyed this book. I think that's all I have to say about this book. I really enjoyed it. I love the writing of the author. I hope she publishes more books, which I'm sure she will, but she really takes her time with them, which I also love, because I hate when authors just like pump out book after book just because they have to for like the hype, rather than just take their time and just write something that's really great and like thought through. And I'm pretty sure that's what she does. So I'm really excited for her next book sometime in the future. So the next book is really dear and important to me. It's really close to my heart, okay? And the book is called Once Upon a Broken Heart. And last year, the third, and I'm guessing last of the series came out. So I reread the first two, and the first two are just... You just need to know, when I read this book for the first time, it put me out of a really hard reading slump, because before I just wasn't feeling books anymore at all. I was just thinking maybe I'll just never read again. But then this series came around, and I loved it so much. And I think the writing is just really like fairy tale-ish and whimsical and beautiful, and so magical that I think it's such a beautiful vibe to read. So we're gonna talk about it. Oh, also some important information at the beginning, I guess. This book series is not the first. So there's another book series in the same universe that comes before this one, and it's called Caraval. Caraval. I personally didn't love the book series, so I personally think you can just read Once Upon a Broken Heart without the other. But if you want some more backstory, especially on Jax, because Jax, the Prince of Hearts, he's also in the other series, and it's just kind of like giving a little bit of backstory to him and his character. And some things are mentioned in this series that you might not understand if you haven't read the other one. But I personally didn't enjoy the other one that much. So I think it's fine if you just read this series. That's what I'm saying. But you can also read the other one before if you want to. Okay. In the story, we follow Evangeline. That's our main character. She has pink hair, by the way. It's really not important for the story, but it's just like a vibe. And Evangeline is a really, in my opinion, a really great character, because she's really sweet and lovely and kind, but she can also fight. You know what I mean? Actually, she can't really fight, but you know, like, she's very strong-willed still, and she follows her beliefs, and I love that for her. But anyways, at the beginning of the story, our girl is struggling a little bit because her boyfriend is kinda marrying her sister. And so she's like, no, that cannot be true. I mean, like, we love each other. He's the love of my life, obviously. And so he must be cursed. And so she goes to the Prince of Hearts, because in this world we have fates. They're basically like gods, I guess, and they're like worshipped or feared, and the Prince of Hearts is one of them, and like the name suggests, he has to do with hearts. So she decides that she wants to go to him and ask him for help to get her boyfriend back. But the Prince of Hearts is not that kind. He doesn't really seem that heartful, more like heartless. And so she has to make a bargain with him, because otherwise he won't help her. And she just realizes that making a bargain with like a magical immortal being might not be that smart. We just follow her on her story, and she's just really hopeful about like happily ever after, and everything's gonna turn out great in the end. But you just start to realize that life is kind of hard, you know? So yeah, I personally loved the second book the most. It was so beautiful. Some people said that it was kind of boring because, like I said, I love books that are like no plot, just vibes. And this second book is really just vibes. Like, if you're there for the vibes, best book I've ever read. Maybe not the best one I've ever read, but just like, it's really one of my absolute favorite books because it's just so beautiful to read, and you just feel like you're being put in like a warm blanket while reading it, even though it's actually kind of stressful as well. Maybe I shouldn't talk about books and videos because I just can't explain it at all, but I just want to talk about them. So if me rambling doesn't make sense, I'm sorry, but I just love this book so much, and it's just really beautiful and magical and whimsical, and I really love Evangeline. And the fan art, just look up fan art for this book. I swear, for me, that was what sold it to me. I just saw fan art and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to read this book. So yeah, personally one of my favorite books ever, low-key. I really loved it. Just read the second one as well, because the second one is so good. Personally, I didn't love the third one, but we don't have to talk about that. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about is not Alice in Wonderland, because that's obviously really known and popular. But if you didn't know, because I feel like most people don't know this, there's a second book that's called Alice Through the Looking Glass or Into the Looking Glass. I think it's like Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There, or something like that. Yeah, right. Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There. And it's just Alice having one of her fun, really random adventures again. I'm pretty sure most characters are new in this one, so I don't think you need to have read Alice in Wonderland, even though you should, because it's also a great book. But in this one, Alice just is hanging out in her home, and she looks at the mirror that's hanging somewhere in their house, and she's just like, wait, somehow it looks a little different than this here right now. Shouldn't the mirror be like the exact same? And so when she tries to touch it, she can go through, and so she just goes through, because why not? And on the other side, there's like really fun characters. I'm pretty sure, like, for example, the Queen of Hearts is not there, but the Red Queen and the White Queen are there, and I think they're kind of different characters. I do think there's some reoccurring characters like Tweedledee and Tweedledum, but like I said, everything's just completely different in this world, so you don't need to have the knowledge of the other one. It's just another one of Alice's adventures. And I don't know, I feel like not that many people know there is another book, and I really love this book, so I would just recommend it. The next book I just read this month, and I really enjoyed it, and it's called The House in the Cerulean Sea. I'm pretty sure that's a very popular book, so I don't know why I haven't gotten to it yet, but I really liked it. And also, that was one of the books that I just read like over a week ago, I think. And that was when we had really nice weather outside, so I could just sit in the garden and read it and just feel the vibes, and that was so nice. So in the story, we follow our main character called Linus, and he's just like a 40-year-old dude that just works as a social worker, I think. Kind of like a social worker, let's just say it like that. And he's actually pretty chill with his life. Like, he's just hanging out, living his life. Every day is kind of the same. And in this world, there are orphanages for children with magical abilities. And if their parents died unexpectedly, they go to different orphanages than normal children, I guess. And our main character is a social worker, and he always goes to those orphanages to see if everything's alright, if the children are treated well, and just overall decide if the orphanage should keep going or not. So if it's like a safe space for the children or not. And he's also pretty good at that job, which then ends up not being great for him because he gets sent to one of the worst orphanages that has like the baddest children, like the craziest magical children. One of them, for example, is the literal Antichrist. So he finds out and he's like, what the? Okay, so this is the child of the devil, huh? But yeah, for this assignment he has to go there and just find out if the orphanage is a safe space for the children. And he's kind of terrified of the children as well, though, because they are a little bit more magical than some others. Yeah, the point of the story is just like a little bit of found family, and he just realizes that maybe the government isn't that great and maybe those children deserve to have nice lives. So, I mean, I would say the plot is pretty obvious. And I think in the end, like, I wouldn't say that's a spoiler, but I do think at the end they kind of throw like the message of like acceptance and love and we should all just be happy together. They threw that in a bit too much, where it's like, we get the message, you don't have to explain it 5 times. But yeah, I really liked it. My personal absolute favorite trope of any book is found family, so that was just magical. I also just think that the writing is so nice, like the descriptions of the place, like the cerulean sea, we get it, like the color cerulean is really important because the main character is like, oh my gosh, I've never seen cerulean before, what a gorgeous color. But yeah, just like the writing and the way it's described is just really beautiful, and the story is so sweet and the kids are so sweet. And I also read it while listening to the audiobook, and just also listen to the audiobook, please, because the person narrating it, I don't know who it is, but they just had such distinct voices for all these different characters, and it just made the children feel so much more real, and you just felt for them and you just started to love them, and the story was just really sweet overall. I had so much fun and it was just very nice. Okay, my camera died, but I think I was finished with what I wanted to say, so yeah. Anyways, those were actually all the books that I wanted to talk about. I do have a few other ones that I'm reading right now, but like I'm not far into it enough that I can talk about it, I think. So maybe next year. But those books were just some of my all-time favorite books, and also some that I just read this month and I just loved them and thought they just felt like spring and had just like a nice vibe for like this kind of season. I also just feel like this month has been such a great reading month for me. I really enjoyed most of the books. I just had all the spring feelings that I wanted to, and even when the weather was really bad, which it really was some days, it just felt very nice, and I'm so ready for spring now. Like I can't with this April weather anymore. So I really hope we're getting the spring vibes now in May. And I'm pretty sure I'm still gonna read a lot of spring vibes books. Like I said, I'm still reading some of them right now, so I can't talk about them yet, but I'm really enjoying these types of books right now, and I hope you enjoy them as well. That's all from me. Thanks for being here. I hope these books were kind of interesting. I personally love them so much, so thank you for watching. Bye!